about some research that they'd commissioned around cutting the tax on tobacco to try to stop the illegal tobacco trade. He wants to see the excise cut back to 2019 levels. Here he is.
So we know that if we were to reduce back to 2019 levels, which in percentage terms would be a 30% reduction in excise, which would represent about $10 to $12 on today's price on a pack of cigarettes. So a pack that might be $37 today, which is roughly the price for 20s, would drop back to about 25. So we think that allows the government to still work on keeping the tobacco sales down, but what it would do is remove a lot of the illicit tobacco from the market as well.
Well, that call is partly because efforts to crack down on the illegal trade haven't worked. In Victoria, there's now a licensing system for retailers. There are fines for non-compliance, but inspectors are few on the ground. Certainly the jury is still out on whether it will make a real dent in the illegal market. And Victoria is not the only state with an issue. In WA, there's been a spate of firebombs and robberies, and that's prompted a crackdown. And it does, on paper at least, look tougher than what the Victorian government is doing. In this state, the highest penalty for an individual possessing illicit tobacco is just under $171,000. In WA, it's $4.2 million. Laura Hunter is the CEO of the Australian Council on Smoking and Health, based in WA. Laura, hello.
Hi, Ali. Thanks for having me.
So how big an issue relative to, I guess, the issues that we have and are well publicised here in Victoria, how big an issue does WA have?
It's a significant issue here in WA. And as you mentioned, we are also seeing the firebombs. We are seeing intimidation. We are seeing lots of robberies, all linked to the illicit trade. And from a health perspective, it's deeply concerning because illicit tobacco is cheap and it's often sold without any of those safeguards that have helped drive down smoking rates over decades. So the new laws also in WA, which aren't in Victoria at the moment, include some closure orders. So if an inspector goes out and sees undercover operations that show illicit trading, they can issue an on-the-spot 90-day closure order alongside those eye-watering penalties. And we've seen that happen in Queensland, we've seen it happen in South Australia, and I've seen a lot of colleagues sending me photos from those states saying, check out these convenience stores, I didn't even suspect they were selling, and there's signs up all along the high street saying, we've been shut down for 90 days.
How long have you had a licensing scheme for?
WA was one of the first states to actually have a licensing scheme, but it hasn't been updated to be modernised really since 2017. So ACOSH has been advocating relentlessly to the WA government to have that updated. We've been talking to them about closure orders and penalties being really, really important. So the WA government has decided to break it up into two tranches. The first step is those closure orders and those penalties, and the next step is coming in Q3, where they're going to look at some more of those retail licensing kind of loopholes that they're going to close off as well.
So, I suppose we've put in a licensing system. It's very new here in Victoria, and it's considered to be, well, really, it's a centrepiece of the government's crackdown in this state. But clearly, looking at WA's experience, licensing in itself does not work.
No. Well, what we need to do is see those licensing schemes enforced. You have 14 FTE in Victoria, feet on the ground, going around implementing this, and you don't have closure orders to be able to shut down the stores doing the wrong thing. Comparing that at the moment to Queensland, they have 180 FTE, feet on the ground, and they have closure orders. So, you know, I want to come back to that tax narrative as well, Ali, because that tobacco excise was never meant to be an endless source of revenue for the government, right? It's designed to cut smoking rates, and it's been incredibly successful at doing that here in Australia. There has been renewed calls to cut the tax. But what that would do on the ground is have all cigarettes sold at bargain basement prices. And that logic to us in public health is breathtaking.
I take your point, but hasn't the sort of the whole reason for putting that excise in a health purpose to try and discourage people from smoking, hasn't that now, you know, you've gone way past the tipping point and now people are just not buying legal cigarettes. They're buying completely unregulated illegal cigarettes far cheaper. So that health benefit of price, that driver in the market is no longer working.
Well, when criminals undercut the law, you don't price match the criminals, you enforce the law. Or if stolen goods are cheaper, we don't cut the price of legitimate products to compete. You shut down the illegal market.
But can you do that? I suppose my point would be, can you do that? Because we know, for example, it's illegal to bring in cocaine, but cocaine gets to the market. So can they really do that?
I think they can, because we're seeing it work in other states, Ali. We really are. And I don't have any white flag in my back pocket giving up on this, because that tobacco excise is important, right, for public health. I don't want to see cheaper cigarettes happening. I identify that there is a concern with the illicit tobacco trade, but I've spoken to members of police all across the country, and this is their response to me when I propose those closure orders. They say, Laura, you will cop a lot of flack from the public to say it's going to drive it underground. But police have said to me, bring it on. That's our playground. We'll nab them underground, and then those shops aren't so visible on every street corner. And if you can whack them with high penalties at the same time, they'll move on to dealing with the trade of another illicit product. That's not going to addict the next generation of kids to a toxic product.
You're listening to Laura Hunter, who's the CEO of the Australian Council on Smoking and Health. Laura, before I let you go,
sure.
What do you make of the argument? And a lot of people I spoke to yesterday who called to the program after we had that conversation with the Ritchies CEO just said that while the prices are so high of legal tobacco, they will continue to buy illegal tobacco. So why not match the price of the criminals, which, as you say, is ridiculous, but match the price of the criminals to wipe out the illegal trade, and then essentially you have a clean state and you can start again.
So we've seen overseas why the make it cheaper approach isn't the answer. In the 90s, Canada cut the tobacco taxes in response to tobacco industry pressure, and the price drop was followed by increased smoking amongst young people in Canada, the exact opposite of what Australia has spent decades working towards. So my MO, my biggest priority, is making sure that young people are not targeted by tobacco products and tobacco industry narrative. And as much as there is always going to be an illicit trade of a product like this, the government has every opportunity to stamp it out and enforce the retail licensing scheme, strengthen it if it needs to be strengthened, and crack on with shutting down these stores.
Laura Hunter, good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
That's Laura Hunter there, CEO of the Australian Council on Smoking and Health, based in WA, which has just announced this crackdown. They've had a licensing scheme for years, but they are now cracking down even harder. And